everyone. I'd like to call this meeting of the Select Special Committee on Real Property Rights to order and welcome everyone in attendance. My name is RJ Sigurdsson, MLA for Highwood and chair of this committee. I'd ask that members and those joining the committee at the table introduce themselves for the record, and then I will call on those joining in by video conference. We'll begin in the room to my right.
Good morning, everyone. Nicholas Milliken, MLA Calgary-Curry.
Good morning, everyone. Chris Nielsen, MLA for Edmonton Decorah.
Connie Govindarajan, lawyer with Office of Parliamentary Counsel.
Melanie Nimi-Bowen, research officer.
Good morning, Nancy Robert, clerk of journals and committees.
Warren Huffman, committee clerk.
Thank you. We will now go to those joining us virtually. I will start with MLA Rutherford.
Thank you, MLA Brad Rutherford, Leduc Beaumont.
I will then move to MLA Hanson.
MLA Dave Hanson, Bonneville Cold Lake, St. Paul.
Next, I have MLA Roswell.
MLA Garth Roswell, Vermilion, Lloydminster, Wainwright.
Next, I have MLA Sweet.
Good morning, Heather Sweet, MLA for Edmonton Manning.
And next, I have MLA Yao.
Danielle, MLA for Fort McMurray Wood Buffalo.
And as well on the line, we have participating and just viewing this meeting, MLA Smith. MLA Smith, please introduce yourself.
Good morning, Mark Smith, MLA Drayton Valley, Devon.
Oh, and sorry, MLA Marlon Schmidt as well.
Yeah, Marlon Schmidt, MLA for Edmonton Gold Bar. And just a reminder to the chair that it looks like Kathleen Ganley has also joined us.
Excellent, and I've just recognized that. So as well, chiming in today's meeting, please introduce yourself, MLA Ganley. I apologize. Please go ahead.
No worries, Mr. Chair. Kathleen Ganley, Calgary Mountain View. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, and we also have representatives from the Ministry of Justice and Solicitor General joining us today. We have Miss Kelly Hillier, barrister and solicitor. As well, we have Miss Lisa Tischer, Assistant Deputy Minister, Legal Services Division. Thank you both for joining us today. For the record, I will note the following substitutions. We have Mr. Steffen for Mr. Van Dyken. And I see that Mr. Steffen has just logged on. MLA Steffen, would you like to introduce yourself?
MLA Jason Steffen, Red Deer South.
Thank you. Now moving on, a few housekeeping items to address before we turn to the business at hand. I would note for the members that masks should be worn in the committee room except when you are speaking, and members are also encouraged to leave an appropriate amount of physical distance around the table. The committee room galleries are currently closed to the public, so guests attending committee meetings are required to do so virtually. Please note that the microphones are operated by Hansard staff. Committee proceedings are live streamed on the internet and broadcast on Alberta Assembly TV. The audio and video stream and transcripts of meetings can be accessed via the Legislative Assembly website. Members participating remotely should ensure that they are prepared to speak or voted when called upon. And video conference participants are encouraged to have their cameras on when speaking and their microphone muted when they are not speaking. Members participating virtually who wish to be placed on a speakers list are asked to email or send a message in the meeting chat to the committee clerk. And members in the room are asked to please signal the chair. Please set your cell phones and other devices to silent for the duration of the meeting. We'll now move on to item number 2, approval of the agenda. Are there any changes or additions to the draft agenda? If not, would somebody like to make a motion to approve the agenda? I see MLA Milliken. Moved by MLA Milliken that the agenda for the February 11th, 2022 meeting of the Select Special Committee on Real Property Rights be adopted as distributed. In the room, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. In the room, those opposed say nay. On video conference, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 On video conference, all those opposed, please say nay. Hearing none, thank you. That motion is carried. Next, moving on to item number 3, approval of the minutes. Next, we have the draft minutes of our December 21st, meeting. Are there any errors or omissions to note? If not, would a member like to make a motion to approve the minutes? And I see MLA Nielsen. So moved by MLA Nielsen that the minutes of the December 21st, 2021 meeting of the Select Special Committee on Real Property Rights be approved as distributed. In the room, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. In the room, opposed, say nay. On video conference, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 On video conference, all those opposed, please say nay. Hearing none, thank you. That motion is also carried. Moving on to item number 4, American Sign Language Interpretation. When the committee initially planned for public meetings, we discussed the feasibility of having American Sign Language interpretation for those meetings. After the LAO provided the committee with details on the ASL process, I believe there was general consensus that given the rural locations of most of the public meetings and the fact that there would only be an audio broadcast of those meetings, it might be most practical to have ASL interpretation during the Edmonton virtual meeting only. Now that we are in a position to hold our planned public meetings again, I just want to ensure that the committee members are comfortable with that direction, and I will move at this time. Does anybody have any questions in regards to American Sign Language and holding that for our Edmonton virtual meeting only? Sorry, Ms. Ganley, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to ask, just to be sure I understand what you're saying. I'm just wondering if someone reaches out and requests accommodation in that way, whether there will be consideration given to providing it.
At this point in time, the general consensus, and being the fact that ASL has is of course something new that we are offering. I know that we had more in-depth discussion. We wanted to utilize the Edmonton meeting as a catch-all and advertise it as being ASL friendly for that purpose, to allow anybody requiring that to be able to access that one meeting. For the rest of the public meetings, because of the rural audio and just the complications, we were just planning on the in-person Edmonton meeting only. Hopefully that answers your question, MLA Ganley. I think we might have lost MLA Ganley. Oh, still leaving, jumping in and out. I guess I'll move on to the other committee members. Is there any other questions or concerns regarding the format for ASL for the Edmonton virtual meeting only? We're looking for general consensus here just to go ahead to getting that planning in place for that meeting. Sorry, MLA Milliken, please go ahead.
I just have one quick question, and I guess that would probably be to Ms. Robert, perhaps. What's the turnaround time from having a public meeting, say in St. Paul, and then there being a Hansard transcript available online as well?
Sorry, please go ahead, Ms. Robert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I suspect, and I hate to speak for Hansard, but I suspect maybe 24 hours-ish, depending on what else is going on in terms of other committee meetings. That's sort of what I suspect, but I stand to be corrected. Hansard, of course, is not here, so. But I think that sounds reasonable.
MLA Milliken, follow-up?
No, I think that seems to be in line with what we've seen previously, so probably.
Excellent. I see. Oh, sorry. Please go ahead, Ms. Robert.
I've just heard from Hansard, and they're saying they are permitted 2 days usually, 2 business days to get it produced. So.
Excellent. I did see MLA Sweet raise your hand. Did you still have a question, MLA Sweet?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I guess I just want to get a little bit more clarity. So we're saying we would only do ASL for the Edmonton meetings. Is there a rationale as to why we wouldn't want to make sure? Oh, sorry. Now you can see me. Why we wouldn't want to make sure that accessibility is across every meeting that we're having? What is the rationale for that?
I will maybe defer this over to Ms. Robert again to speak about this a little bit, but there were some logistical issues just on how that would be performed, because it's never been done before, and limited internet and other areas. But I will pass it on to MLA Robert, or Ms. Robert. Wow, struggling this morning. Ms. Robert for additional comments. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, so I think the situation is this, that technically, yes, ASL could be performed for these rural meetings. The interpreter could be in the broadcast booth in the federal building, listening to the audio. But, you know, there are concerns with rural internet and that type of issue. But technically it could be done. The other option would be to have the interpreters in the room. But of course, since there's no video broadcast of the meetings, that means they would be doing ASL for the 10 or 15 people who are in the room, as opposed to the audio broadcast. So technically it's possible, but I think where the committee was sort of leaning was that perhaps given all of these potential issues and the fact that there's no video broadcast of the meetings, that perhaps advertising the Edmonton public meeting as the one that will have ASL would permit anybody in the province from phoning in or tuning in to that meeting to benefit from ASL. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
MLA Sweet, do you have a follow-up, or does that answer your question?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, I appreciate the barriers to making sure that there's this accessibility. I guess my struggle is that if we're going to say that we believe that this is a service that should be provided, and I believe that it should be, I think making as much accessibility to the citizens of Alberta on this issue should be done. I appreciate that we're also not going to be live streaming the outside of Edmonton meetings, which I think I also struggle with a bit because of that accessibility. So I'll just leave that at that and just put it on the record that I think if we're going to talk about accessibility and making sure that it's available to all Albertans, that we try to put as many supports in place. But it's the will of the committee, so I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you, MLA Sweet. I see that MLA Ganley, I do believe, has rejoined us, and she did drop off there. Must have been experiencing some internet issues. I'm just wondering if MLA Ganley, did you want to jump back in? You kind of got cut off there right in the middle. Please go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Chair, it kind of froze and I missed most of what you said. I think all I wanted to check was that if I think the way you're proceeding doesn't seem unreasonable to me. I just wanted to check that if someone specifically reached out and requested accommodation for whatever reason, that we would make the attempt to accommodate them.
Duly noted, MLA Ganley. Is there any other questions or concerns regarding ASL at this time? I will just open it up to the floor briefly. Based on this, should we get a motion in place?
So then you're going to need approval to put the motion on the floor.
I think at this time, just so that we're clear and we've got clear direction on this, just I think what we will do is there was no formal motion put to the floor to this committee regarding the ASL. But at this time, I think just to make sure that we're clear and that we are moving forward with the general will of the committee, I think it might be recommended that we look for permission to put a formal motion to the committee. Of course, we would need permission by the committee through vote to be able to put that forward. So I'm just going to briefly pause for 1 second just to make sure we get this right before we move ahead. Does it have to be? Sorry, go ahead, MLA Milliken.
I'll just take the opportunity to then jump in and say that I would like to, if possible, move a motion from the floor. And I believe that we have to, it will be surrounding this idea of ASL, but I don't want to give it all away.
Yeah, we'll put it up.
So at this point in time, I think I'll open it up to the committee. Of course, this is a vote to allow a motion to be put forward regarding the ASL. So at this time, sorry, I see a hand raised. Just go ahead, MLA Ganley.
I'm sorry, what is the motion? We are deciding whether we're going to allow it to the floor?
First, before we proceed, MLA Ganley, we have to vote to allow a motion to be proposed regarding ASL before we can move ahead with that motion. And that, so it has to be the will of the committee to allow a motion to be moved first before we can put the motion up.
But we decide that we're going to allow the motion before we know what the motion is?
Allowed to hear the motion.
We're just voting to allow to hear the motion. So based on the process that we have and motions having to be submitted, we have to vote first as a committee to allow a motion to be moved first before we even move into that discussion portion.
No, I understand that. It's just been my experience in these committees that normally they read the motion and then we vote to allow the motion and then we vote on the motion.
And if you know what, in that case, and just to accommodate MLA Ganley, we'll just pause briefly and we'll just get some rough wording put around that to be able to post up for everybody to be able to look at, which I think is coming up right now. And it should be on the screen. I'll allow just a brief second for everybody to review that, and then I'll go back to MLA Milliken. Is this roughly represent the wording that you would propose for your motion, MLA Milliken?
Yeah, in the interest of, it sounds like it's my experience in these committees that when a motion's coming from the floor, that the exact motion doesn't get necessarily put forward. It's a decision to hear that there would be potentially a motion from the floor, and then there'd be discussion surrounding that motion. That said, at least that's my interpretation, I think, of the standing orders. But if given the opportunity to showcase it right away, that'd be great. So I guess what we have on the screen does, I think, represent in large part what I think I was going to move forward on a motion. So just for the record then, I would move that the Select Special Committee on Real Property Rights provide for ASL interpretation of the Edmonton virtual public meeting on February 16th, 2022, noting that, of course, this is just I think a vote to potentially hear it, and then I may have to read it into the record again for the purposes of the next vote.
So at this point in time, we will pause before we can move into a discussion period on this motion. We do need a majority vote of the committee to be able to proceed. So at this time, I will say all those in favor in the room of allowing a motion to be moved regarding ASL, please say aye. Aye. All those in the room opposed, please say nay. Virtually, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Virtually, all those opposed, please say nay. So at this time, hearing none, that motion, or that is approved, I will move back to MLA Milliken to be able to give a brief comments towards the motion, maybe read it out for the record, in which we can vote on it formally and move forward. Please go ahead, MLA Milliken.
Sure, yeah. I would move that the Select Special Committee on Real Property Rights provide for ASL interpretation of the Edmonton virtual public meeting on February 16th, 2022. I think it's been stated in this that the Edmonton meeting would be used as, I think the term was a catch-all, so I think it provides the opportunity to ensure that we make it as accommodating as possible, given the circumstances. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you, MLA Milliken. Is there any further discussion on this motion? Seeing and hearing none, we will now move to vote on the motion. All those in favor of the motion as moved by MLA Milliken in the room, please say aye. Aye. In the room, all those opposed, please say nay. Virtually, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Virtually, all those opposed, please say nay. Hearing none, that motion is carried. So we are now moving on to item number 5, private citizen written submissions. We'll go on to 5A, late submissions. So honorable members, the committee passed a motion on May 31st, 2021, soliciting written submissions from the members of the public. The submission period was open for a period of 4 months from June 15th to October 15th. During that time, the committee received a total of 28 submissions from the public. There was one late submission received on October 19th, 4 days after the deadline. Does the committee, I'm just going to open this up and just ask the general question. Does the committee wish to accept this late submission? And I will just open it up to some discussion, and I see MLA Nielsen has raised his hand. Please go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I think it's one thing if a submission was showing up, months late. We're talking about days here. I don't see there's a problem with accepting one single submission that was 4 days late. So let's just accept it.
Excellent. Thanks, MLA Nielsen. Now I see MLA Milliken. Go ahead.
I'll just say ditto.
That was the quickest ever response to that. And I'll briefly pause and see anybody on video conference have any comments regarding the late submission. Seeing and hearing none, it appears that there is general agreement unanimously across the committee in this matter. And if, of course, that is the will of the committee, which it appears to be, we will accept that late submission. We'll now move on to 5B, decision on making written submissions public. The committee should also now consider whether these written submissions from private citizens will be made publicly available. This is a common practice with this type of review. And at our July 8th, 2021 meeting, the committee passed a motion to make the invited stakeholder submissions public. Those are available on the committee's external website. When the committee solicited written submissions from the public, the advertising clearly stated that submissions may be made public. And the submission form also required the submitter to check a box to acknowledge their understanding that the submission may be made public prior to completing their submission. So submitters were aware of this possibility when they did submit. With that said, is there any discussions with regards to the matter of making the written submissions public? MLA Nielsen, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. We should, make them public. I think it helps to feed a broader discussion, gives folks a bit of a look at other sort of personal situations, how that might, relate to their own and things like that. And I think it just allows for a better discussion overall. So I would certainly encourage folks to, allow those submissions to be made public.
Excellent. Thank you, MLA Nielsen. Now we see MLA Milliken. Please go ahead.
And I think I'll take the opportunity again to just say ditto. Do we need to do a formal motion with regards to this? Because I'd be perfectly, if we have maybe some draft wording, or I could try to do it on the fly.
We'll just pause briefly. I do believe there is a draft motion regarding this that is coming up on the screen. And MLA Milliken, is it your intent to move this motion?
It would be my intent to move this motion, and I can read it in really quick just for the way we did it last time.
Please go ahead.
That the Select Special Committee on Real Property Rights make the written submissions received from private citizens available to the public, with the exception of portions which contain personal contact information other than the name and location of the submitter, or personal information about an identifiable third party.
Excellent. Thank you, MLA Milliken. Is there any further discussion regarding the motion moved by MLA Milliken? Seeing and hearing none, I will now propose to the committee to vote on this motion. So, motion moved by MLA Milliken. All those in favor in the room, please say aye. Aye. In the room, opposed, please say nay. On video conference, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 On video conference, all those opposed, please say nay. Hearing none, that motion is carried. We're now moving on to item number 6 in the agenda, Research Services Cross-Jurisdictional Comparison. At our September 10th meeting, the committee directed Research Services to prepare a cross-jurisdictional comparison on expropriation legislation across Canada. That report has been posted on the committee's internal site for members to review. I would now like to invite Dr. Niemi Bowen to provide an overview of the document. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to present Research Services cross-jurisdictional review of expropriation legislation. I will keep this introduction, kind of an introduction to the document at a very high level. In the interest of making useful comparisons for the committee, Research Services has taken a particular approach to the committee's research assignment. This document surveys Alberta's Expropriation Act and compares its provisions where possible to those in British Columbia and Ontario, and we've provided some annotation throughout. Ontario's legislation is of interest because it was recently amended in 2020. British Columbia's is of interest because their legislation includes regulations that contain a tariff and scale of cost for legal fees and real estate appraisals, which the committee can find in Appendix A, starting on page 32. The document has 4 main sections: definitions, procedures for expropriation, compensation, and procedures for compensation. In the first section of the document, which starts on page 6, the document explains how each jurisdiction defines the following terms: expropriation, expropriating authority, approving authority, land, owner, tenant, and tribunal. And here it is worth noting that in British Columbia, there is no longer an equivalent to Alberta's Land and Property Rights Tribunal. Rather, in British Columbia, the BC Supreme Court deals with expropriation and compensation matters. Turning to the second section of the document, titled Procedures for Expropriation, you will see in section 3.0, starting on page 10, that each jurisdiction sets out processes for expropriation that must be followed. We have noted here that these processes are broadly similar in each jurisdiction. Our document explains in detail the processes that must be followed in Alberta to provide the committee with context for the discussion that follows with regard to Ontario and British Columbia. Section 4.0, which begins on page 16, addresses compensation. Here, the document defines the concept of market value in each jurisdiction. It then turns to the provisions that are set out in legislation for various circumstances, such as land that has a building used for a specific purpose, land that includes a residence, partial expropriation, damages attributable to disturbance, and business losses, among some others. Now here, where possible, and throughout the document, similarities and differences among the 3 jurisdictions are noted throughout the section. Section 5.0, which can be found beginning on page 26, covers the procedures for compensation. This section discusses proposed payment and appraisals, interest payments, appeals, and revesting of expropriated interests. So for ease of reading for the committee, we have included both footnotes and statements in bold to draw your attention to some of the differences and similarities between the jurisdictions with respect to expropriation legislation. We hope you will find the document helpful. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much for putting this important information together. This is a very in-depth document that I think will provide some great guidance to the committee. So thank you for all your hard work on putting that together and being here today to give us an overview on this. I will now open it up to the floor for questions from committee members. I'll also note that we do as well have representatives from Justice and Solicitor General here as a part of the committee's previous motion to have continued technical support throughout our review. I will just pause now and see if there's any questions or concerns that the committee, any committee member would like to bring forward. So I'll just pause right now. And I see MLA Nielsen first.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the overview of that. One of the things I saw, maybe it's a little bit of a recurring theme, it seems that things are getting aimed towards the court system in the other jurisdictions. I don't know if you know the answer to this. Is there court costs that would be associated to individuals that I guess end up having to go through that process? Like you had mentioned in BC now, the Supreme Court is dealing with expropriation. So, you know, I guess my concern is you know, when Albertans are looking to see what this process should look like, if their option is going to be to go through the court system, and that's going to start to cost them potentially a lot of money. I think that's cause for concern. So I'm wondering if you know any information.
So in terms of the cost, so Appendix A does have the tariff of cost that British Columbia uses, but I would also maybe ask the technical experts at Justice. They might want to chime in because they would have the more in-depth legal training.
And I think at this time it is appropriate that we will just see if Ms. Kelly Hillier or Ms. Lisa Tischer wants to comment on the, and I see Kelly Hillier, please go ahead.
Good morning. The expropriation legislation in Alberta currently leaves the cost for expropriation on the expropriating authority. I'm not familiar with how cost breakdowns happen in BC, aside from the fact that, as was just stated, they do have a tariff of cost and fees which really puts a cap on how much things can cost and how far things can go. Alberta doesn't have a cap such as that. So presumably, I have no reason not to think that it's not also the expropriating authorities in BC that are also paying for any costs associated with expropriation.
Thank you, Ms. Hillier. Emily Nielsen, do you have a follow-up?
No, I don't.
No follow-up. And I see a hand raised. MLA Ganley, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to ask why the particular focus on BC and Ontario. I'm just curious because I think the system, I'm reaching back in the past now, but I think the system, the land title system in Ontario is sort of, say, less similar to the one we have here than like Saskatchewan or Manitoba or similar jurisdictions. So I'm just curious why the focus was on those particular two jurisdictions.
So with our approach to this document, given the complexity of expropriation legislation across Canada, we decided to choose two jurisdictions that had some, with Ontario particularly, because it was recently amended, we felt that those changes could provide some insight for the committee to consider. And then with British Columbia, because it had that tariff of costs, again, we felt that that could be helpful for the committee to consider in terms of differences. So if the committee is interested in further jurisdiction, we of course are happy to provide additional research for the committee.
Emily Ganley, you have a follow-up?
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Are there any further questions at this time? Well, seeing and hearing none, and as there is no more questions, I would first like to thank Naomi Bone for your presentation and the cross-jurisdictional comparison. And also, I'd like to thank Ms. Tisher and Ms. Hillier for attending this morning and answering some questions for the committee. At this time, we will move now on to agenda item 7, other business. Is there any other items that members would like to discuss today? Seeing and hearing none, moving on to 8, date of the next meeting. The next meeting will be our virtual public meeting next Wednesday on February 16th, 2022. 9, agenda item 9, adjournment. If there's nothing else for the committee's consideration, I'd call for a motion to adjourn. MLA Milliken, moved by MLA Milliken that the meeting be adjourned. All those in the room in favor, please say aye. In the room opposed, please say nay. On video conference, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
On video conference, all those opposed, please say nay. Hearing none, thank you. That motion is carried. Thank you, everyone. Please remember to clean up any drinks and other items as you leave. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.